welcome back to another episode of Insects for Fun. Today, we're doing something a bit different. This episode is in the format I use for my Patreon bonus episodes, and covers noteworthy news. With that being said, let's get into it. We're starting off today with a modern-day Siang expedition, an effort to resurvey the biodiversity of the Siang Valley in the Himalayas. This area was first scientifically documented during the colonial era Arbor expedition of 1911 to 1912. That original journey, conducted alongside a small military campaign, cataloged the valley's flora and fauna, leading to significant contributions in natural history. Now, a century later, the Siang expedition, funded by the National Geographic Society, is uncovering new species in a region that has remained largely unexplored since that time. And on that note, let me introduce to you a brand new species of ant discovered by a team of entomologists from the Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and the Environment and the University of Florida. This new species is named Paraparatrecina nila and is unlike any other ant in its genus. The species name refers to its iridescent blue body that sets it apart from the 16,724 known species and subspecies of ants worldwide. One evening, the team of researchers were exploring a tree hole about 10 feet up a steep cattle track in a remote village of Siang Valley. A cattle track is a stripped path or walkway either man-made or naturally formed by cattle moving in a line. The researchers didn't actually know what they had sucked up in their respirators until later, because blue is not something people associate with ants at all. And yes, entomologists do actually use small respirators to vacuum up small insects. The collection device has a fine mesh screen which prevents anything from going into our mouths, and the small tube is long enough to add an extra layer of safety. The Siang Valley is not just home to unique species like Paraparatrecina nila, it's also a crucial ecological and cultural landscape. It's incredibly important for millions of people who rely on the rivers and forests of this Himalayan region, but I don't think I need to convince any listeners of this podcast to go green. Let's go from green back to blue. I've mentioned before on this pod how blue is a rare color in the animal kingdom, and this is particularly true for ants. Unlike pigments that produce most colors in nature, the blue hue in insects is often due to structural coloration, where tiny nanostructures reflect light in specific ways. While blue is more common in butterflies, beetles, and bees, it is exceptionally rare in ants, making Paraparatrecina nila a truly unique discovery. This raises fascinating questions, though. Like, why is this ant blue? And could its color help with communication, camouflage, or some other ecological function? Understanding the evolution of this feature could provide new insights into how species adapt to their environments at high elevations, but we're going to have to wait to see just how. Moving on, let's now look at how Florida Carpenter ants treat patients and why it's different from the treatment seen in other ants. Wound care in ants isn't a new discovery, and we've talked about it before on this podcast. Some species, like the Metabele ant of Saharan Africa, have been observed using antimicrobial secretions to disinfect injuries. But Florida carpenter ants, scientifically known as Camponotus floridanus, don't have those handy antibiotic-producing glands. So instead, they rely purely on mechanical means to treat injuries. That means they either clean a wound, or if necessary, they take the entire leg off. But they aren't doing it barbarically. You see, these ants do not amputate at random. They assess the injury and make an informed decision. Researchers found that when a nestmate suffers a laceration on the femur, the upper leg, they don't just clean the wound. They go all in, chewing off the leg entirely. But if the injury is lower down, near the ankle like tibia, they stick to cleaning and leave the leg intact. You might think that's a bit odd. Shouldn't they try and save the entire leg from the top as opposed to just the ankle? Well, apparently it makes a pretty big difference if they only clean femur wounds. In experiments, infected femur injuries treated with amputation had an incredible 90 to 95% survival rate, but when left with only a cleaning, the survival rate dropped to 40%. Even tibia injuries that were only cleaned, not amputated, had about a 75% survival rate, which is pretty good. But why not amputate tibia injuries too? Turns out it all comes down to timing. Micro-CT scans revealed that the femur is packed with muscle tissue that helps pump hemolymph, insect blood, back into the body. A damaged femur slows circulation, reducing the speed of bacteria. The tibia, on the other hand, has little muscle, meaning infections can spread faster. So in tibia injuries, the ants don't have time to amputate. It's a 40-minute procedure, by the way, which is too long to stop an infection. Instead, the ants spend extra time cleaning the wound, trying to limit bacterial spread before it's too late. So where are these ants getting educated for this? Well, they don't go to medical school, they don't watch older ants perform surgery, and they definitely don't read textbooks. Yet somehow, they instinctively know how to assess wounds, make the right call, and even collaborate over long periods to complete a full amputation when needed. It's not just one ant doing the job. One ant starts the amputation, while another takes over to finish the cleaning process. The level of cooperation and precision in these tiny creatures rivals our own medical systems. And now, researchers are investigating whether this behavior exists in other Camponotus species. If other ants without antimicrobial glands also perform amputations, it could point to an even broader evolutionary adaptation to infection control in social insects. This study also raises intriguing questions about pain perception in ants. If they're allowing these slow amputations to happen while fully conscious, by the way, what does that mean about their experience of pain? Do they feel it like we do? Or is their neural wiring so different that they don't experience suffering in the same way? We'll have to wait a bit longer for more answers to these questions. But one thing is clear. Ants are not mindless drones. They're strategic, adaptable, and in many ways, medical pioneers of the insect world. And that's going to wrap up this episode. Thank you as always for listening, and if you want more episodes similar to this one, you can find them on Patreon under Tier 2, which also gets you ad-free content. And as always, don't forget to rate this podcast on whatever platform you listen. 5 stars goes a very long way.